In the quiet streets of Detroit, Michigan, the disappearance of 13-year-old Nazia Harris sent shockwaves through her family and the entire community. Nazia wasn't just another name or face in the crowd. She was a bright, vivacious young girl with dreams as big as her smile. Her story was one of promise, kindness, and innocence, cut short by a horrifying act of betrayal and violence. The pain of her loss reverberated far beyond her family, becoming a symbol of the fragility of safety and trust in even the closest-knit neighborhoods. Nazia was the kind of child who left an impression on everyone she met. Her laughter was infectious, and her personality could light up even the gloomiest of days. Known for her boundless energy and her love of animals, she often dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Her grandmother, Annette Harris, who had raised her from infancy, recalled how Nazia would spend hours drawing at pictures of animals, sometimes adding little notes about how she would care for them one day. Annette described her granddaughter as the sunshine of her life, a child who brought immeasurable joy to her family and friends. Living in a modest home in Detroit, Nazia shared a close bond with her grandmother, who was her legal guardian. Their relationship was full of warmth and understanding. Annette often recounted their shared routines, from morning breakfast to evening chats about school and friends. Nazia was responsible and mature beyond her years, always helping with chores and looking after her younger cousins. She was the kind of child who made her family proud, not just because of her achievements, but because of her kind heart and caring nature. Her teachers at J.E. Clark Preparatory Academy spoke highly of her. They described her as a curious and diligent student who loved science and art. Her friends admired her for her supportive nature, often turning to her for advice or a kind word. Nazia's empathy and thoughtfulness made her a cornerstone of her community. She was the type of person who would stand up for a friend in need or lend a hand to a neighbor without hesitation. The day she vanished, January 9, 2024, began like any other. Nazia woke up early, excited for a new day at school. She had breakfast with her grandmother before heading out to catch the school bus. Dressed in her colorful Rugrats jacket, light blue jeans, and Nike shoes, she left home with a smile, her hair styled neatly into 2 braided puffballs. At school, her day was uneventful, filled with classes and lunchtime laughter with friends. She boarded the bus home as she always did, and was last seen getting off at her usual stop near Cornwall Street and 3 Mile Drive. Nazia's disappearance was immediate and devastating. When she didn't arrive home as expected, Annette Harris's concern quickly turned to panic. Nazia was responsible and always communicated her plans. Annette began calling her granddaughter's phone repeatedly, only to be met with silence. By evening, Annette reported her missing to the police, describing every detail of Nazia's appearance and the last time she was seen. The weight of fear and uncertainty was unbearable, and it only grew as the hours turned into days. Nazia's disappearance shook her family and the Detroit community to its core. As the hours turned into days, the search for her intensified. Annette Harris, her grandmother, was at the forefront of the efforts, her voice filled with desperation as she pleaded with anyone who might have seen something. Flyers with Nazia's picture were distributed across the city, showing her smiling in her clear-framed glasses and distinctive Rugrats jacket. Community members, neighbors, and volunteers joined the search, canvassing the streets near Cornwall Street and 3 Mile Drive where she was last seen. Despite the widespread effort, leads were few and far between. Law enforcement agencies dedicated significant resources to the case. They reviewed hours of surveillance footage from businesses and homes near Nazia's bus stop, looking for any clues. One piece of footage caught Nazia stepping off the school bus, but she appeared to pause and look around as if waiting for someone. Investigators flagged this as a possible sign that she had planned to meet someone, a lead that would prove critical later. Meanwhile, police interviewed family members, friends, and anyone who had interacted with Nazia in the days leading up to her disappearance. Early on, the investigation began to focus on those closest to her. As police delved deeper, one name repeatedly surfaced: Jarvis Butts, a 42-year-old man with familial ties to Nazia. Butts was connected to her family through her biological aunt, with whom he had 5 children. This connection had allowed him access to Nazia, and investigators quickly learned that Butts was a registered sex offender with a prior conviction for third-degree criminal sexual conduct involving a minor. His history and proximity to Nazia raised immediate red flags. Investigators secured search warrants for Butts's phone, devices, and property. What they found painted a deeply troubling picture. Forensic analysts uncovered a series of deleted text messages between Butts and Nazia, some of which contained sexually explicit content. The messages revealed a pattern of grooming, with Butts manipulating Nazia over time and ultimately arranging to meet her on January 9, 2024, the day she disappeared. This discovery shifted the investigation into high gear, and Butts became the primary suspect. Further analysis of Butts's phone revealed an even darker side to the case. Investigators found searches related to abortion methods, abortion pills, and lethal doses of antifreeze. These searches were conducted in the days leading up to Nazia's disappearance, coinciding with text messages where she confided in Butts about a missed menstrual cycle and a possible pregnancy. The evidence suggested premeditation and raised concerns that Butts had taken extreme steps to cover up his actions. Surveillance footage from Butts's auto repair shop confirmed that Nazia had entered the building on the afternoon of January 9th. GPS data from his phone tracked his movements later that day, showing trips to multiple locations, including Ypsilanti and a motel in Harper Woods. The combination of digital evidence, phone records, and surveillance video painted a chilling timeline of events. Police conducted searches at these locations, including a comprehensive search near the Rouge River, where items belonging to Nazia, such as clothing, were discovered. Despite these efforts, Nazia's body has not been recovered. In September 2024, Wayne County prosecutor Kim Worthy announced formal charges against Butts, including first-degree premeditated murder, second-degree criminal sexual conduct, and child sexually abusive activity. The evidence against Butts was substantial, but the absence of Nazia's body presented a significant challenge. Prosecutors relied heavily on the digital evidence and forensic findings to build their case, arguing that the overwhelming circumstantial evidence pointed to Butts's guilt. On January 9, 2025, exactly 1 year after Nazia's disappearance, 36th District Judge Aaliyah Sabri ruled that there was enough evidence for Butts to stand trial. During the hearing, Judge Sabri referred to Butts as a monster, expressing her belief that he had raped, impregnated, and killed Nazia, likely attempting a do-it-yourself abortion that led to her death. The case will now proceed to circuit court for arraignment and eventual trial, though a specific trial date has not yet been set. For Annette Harris and the community, this decision marked a crucial step toward justice, but it also underscored the profound loss of a bright and promising young life. The decision to move Jarvis Butts's case to trial marked a critical milestone, but the journey toward justice for Nazia Harris was far from over. Prosecutors began preparing an extensive case against Butts, relying on the trove of digital evidence, witness testimonies, and forensic findings that had been meticulously gathered during the investigation. The absence of Nazia's body presented a significant challenge, but the prosecution was confident that the weight of circumstantial evidence would lead to a conviction. Central to their case were the deleted text messages recovered from Butts's phone, which revealed a disturbing and ongoing relationship between him and Nazia. These messages exposed the grooming process he had employed, building trust with her over time and ultimately exploiting her vulnerability. Prosecutors highlighted the explicit nature of the communication and the alarming level of control Butts seemed to have over Nazia. The messages confirmed their planned meeting on January 9, 2024, the day she disappeared, as well as her confiding in him about a missed menstrual cycle, which prosecutors argued was the catalyst for his premeditated actions. In addition to the text messages, Butts's internet search history played a crucial role in establishing his intent. Investigators discovered searches conducted in the days leading up to Nazia's disappearance, including terms like how to make someone disappear, abortion pills, and lethal doses of antifreeze. These searches, prosecutors contended, demonstrated a clear and calculated plan to cover up his crimes. The timeline of these searches, paired with the GPS data from his phone, showed that Butts had taken deliberate steps to ensure that Nazia could not disclose what had happened. Surveillance footage further bolstered the prosecution's case. Video evidence showed Nazia entering Butts's auto repair shop on January 9th, but no footage captured her leaving. This chilling detail added another layer of suspicion, as did GPS data tracking Butts's movements to various locations that day, including the Parkcrest Motel in Harper Woods. Searches of areas along his route led to the discovery of Nazia's belongings, including articles of clothing confirmed by her family. While these findings provided critical evidence, the lack of a body continued to complicate the case, requiring prosecutors to rely heavily on circumstantial evidence and expert testimony. The prosecution planned to call forensic experts to explain the significance of the digital and physical evidence. Specialists in criminal behavior were expected to testify about the grooming process and how predators like Butts manipulate their victims. These experts would also discuss the psychological tactics used to gain control and the extreme measures predators might take to silence victims when their crimes are at risk of being exposed. As the legal proceedings advanced, Butts maintained his innocence, offering no explanation for the damning evidence against him. His defense team focused on the absence of Nazia's body, arguing that without direct physical evidence, the prosecution's case was based on conjecture. They also attempted to cast doubt on the reliability of digital evidence, suggesting alternative interpretations of the GPS data and search history. Despite these efforts, the mountain of evidence pointing to Butts's involvement appeared insurmountable. The case drew widespread attention, not only because of the horrifying details, but also due to its implications for child protection and justice reform. Advocacy groups rallied around Nazia's family, calling for stricter monitoring of sex offenders and more robust measures to safeguard children from predators. Vigils continued to be held in Nazia's memory, with community members demanding accountability and justice. Her grandmother, Annette Harris, remained at the forefront of these efforts, speaking out about her granddaughter's dreams and the need to ensure that no other child suffers a similar fate. The absence of a trial date has not dampened the determination of those seeking justice for Nazia. For Annette and her family, the upcoming trial represents a chance to hold Butts accountable and to bring some measure of closure to an unimaginable tragedy. The weight of the evidence, the collective grief of a community, and the unwavering resolve of Nazia's loved ones all stand as a testament to her enduring impact. The fight for justice continues, fueled by a shared commitment to ensuring that her story is not forgotten and that her memory inspires meaningful change. As the case against Jarvis Butts moved forward, the weight of the evidence continued to dominate discussions both in and outside the courtroom. Prosecutors focused on constructing a narrative that would resonate with the jury, showing not only how Butts manipulated and groomed Nazia Harris, but also how he took calculated steps to cover his tracks after her disappearance. The absence of Nazia's body remained a significant obstacle, but the prosecution sought to demonstrate that the overwhelming circumstantial evidence was more than sufficient to secure a conviction. Central to their strategy was the presentation of Butts's behavior leading up to and following Nazia's disappearance. Investigators discovered that Butts had been actively grooming Nazia for over a year, establishing a relationship of control and dependency. Deleted text messages recovered from his phone revealed his attempts to isolate Nazia and coerce her into secrecy. These messages painted a deeply troubling picture of a man who had manipulated a vulnerable child, and then sought to eliminate any evidence of his crimes when the situation threatened to expose him. The prosecution also emphasized the digital evidence tying Butts to premeditated actions. His internet search history, which included phrases like "how to make someone disappear" and lethal doses of antifreeze, showcased a calculated plan to silence Nazia permanently. Coupled with the discovery of Nazia's belongings along routes that matched Butts's GPS data, the evidence created a timeline of events that prosecutors argued left no room for reasonable doubt. In addition to the physical and digital evidence, the prosecution planned to rely on expert testimony to strengthen their case. Forensic psychologists were expected to explain the methods predators like Butts used to groom their victims, including gaining trust, exploiting vulnerabilities, and maintaining control through manipulation. These experts would also discuss how predators often escalate their actions when faced with exposure, leading to desperate and violent measures. By presenting these patterns of behavior, prosecutors aimed to show that Butts's actions were part of a calculated and premeditated plan. The defense, meanwhile, continued to focus on the absence of Nazia's body as their primary argument. They sought to cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence, suggesting that the lack of physical remains made it impossible to conclusively prove that Nazia was deceased or that Butts was responsible. The defense also attempted to challenge the reliability of the digital evidence, arguing that GPS data and search history could be misinterpreted. Despite their efforts, the prosecution's case was bolstered by the sheer volume and consistency of the evidence. Outside the courtroom, the community remained deeply invested in the case. Vigils were held regularly in Nazia's memory, with family, friends, and supporters gathering to honor her life and demand justice. Advocacy groups used the case as a rallying point, calling for reforms in child protection laws and stronger oversight of registered sex offenders. Many in the community spoke about how Nazia's story had brought to light the vulnerabilities faced by children and the urgent need for systemic change. Annette Harris, Nazia's grandmother, continued to be a prominent voice in these efforts. Despite her grief, she spoke at events and vigils, sharing memories of Nazia and urging lawmakers to take action to protect children from similar tragedies. Her strength and resilience became a source of inspiration for many, symbolizing the determination of a family and a community united in their fight for justice. As the case approached its next stages, the absence of a trial date remained a point of frustration for many. The community's anticipation for accountability and closure was palpable, but the complexity of the case and the legal proceedings required time. Prosecutors remained steadfast in their commitment to holding Butts accountable, while Nazia's family and supporters continued to push for justice. The upcoming trial represents a pivotal moment in the fight for accountability. For Nazia's family, it is not only about ensuring that Butts is held responsible for his actions, but also about honoring the memory of a young girl whose life was stolen far too soon. The case has become a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities that children face and the importance of vigilance, community involvement, and systemic reforms. The fight for justice for Nazia Harris is far from over, but her story continues to inspire change and demand action. As the case against Jarvis Butts progressed, the emotional toll on Nazia Harris's family and friends became increasingly apparent. Annette Harris, Nazia's grandmother and legal guardian, remained a constant presence in court proceedings, community events, and vigils. Her heartbreak was evident every time she spoke about Nazia. "She was my sunshine," Annette often said, her voice trembling with emotion. "She was my reason to keep going. Now all I have left is the fight to bring her justice." Annette's strength, even in the face of unimaginable pain, inspired many in the community to join her in demanding accountability and systemic change. Friends of Nazia, many of whom were just teenagers themselves, struggled to comprehend the tragedy. They spoke about her infectious laughter, her kindness, and the dreams she had shared with them. At one vigil, a classmate tearfully recounted how Nazia had once helped her during a difficult time at school. "She was always there for me. She was the kind of friend you don't forget," she said. These personal stories served as a stark reminder that Nazia was more than a victim. She was a vibrant young girl with a life full of potential that had been cruelly stolen. The broader community continued to rally around the Harris family, holding vigils and marches to honor Nazia's memory. Advocacy groups used the case as a call to action, demanding reforms in how predators are monitored and prosecuted. Many pointed to the fact that Butts, despite being a registered sex offender, had been able to exploit his connection to Nazia's family. "This should never have happened," one advocate said during a rally. "We need better systems in place to protect our children from people like Jarvis Butts." Nazia's case also brought attention to the challenges faced by families raising children in environments where predators may be present. Annette Harris's pain was compounded by the guilt of feeling that she should have been able to protect her granddaughter. "I never thought he would do something like this," she said in an interview. "He was family. How do you prepare for betrayal like that?" Her words struck a chord with many parents and guardians, highlighting the need for increased awareness about grooming and the subtle ways predators manipulate their victims. The absence of Nazia's body remained a source of profound grief for her family and a challenge for prosecutors. Friends and neighbors joined search efforts, scouring parks, wooded areas, and riverbanks in the hope of finding any trace of her. The discovery of Nazia's belongings near the Rouge River was a devastating moment, confirming suspicions that something terrible had happened. Yet without her remains, the family was left without the closure of being able to lay her to rest. In court, prosecutors meticulously laid out the evidence against Butts, but the weight of the proceedings was felt most deeply by those closest to Nazia. Her family sat in the gallery every day, holding hands and offering each other quiet comfort as they listened to the grim details of the case. Friends often joined them, showing solidarity and sharing stories of how Nazia had touched their lives. This collective grief was a testament to the impact Nazia had on everyone who knew her. The case also sparked broader discussions about systemic failures in protecting children. How could someone like Butts, with his history of predatory behavior, have been allowed such close proximity to a vulnerable child? Many in the community demanded stricter monitoring of sex offenders, improved education on grooming and exploitation, and more support for families raising children in difficult circumstances. To viewers, this case raises pressing questions. How can we better protect children like Nazia? Are there enough safeguards in place to prevent predators from exploiting their victims? And how can communities come together to support families and ensure tragedies like this never happen again? We invite you to share your thoughts and engage in this critical conversation. Nazia Harris's story is more than a tragedy. It is a call to action. It reminds us of the importance of vigilance, education, and community involvement in safeguarding children. For her family, friends, and the many people inspired by her memory, the fight for justice is also a fight for change. If there is one thing Nazia's story teaches us, it is that we must do everything in our power to protect the most vulnerable among us. Her life mattered, and her story should compel us all to take a stand against exploitation and violence.